Hey guys, so one thing I talk about a bunch on this channel is reflection, and that is something I am guilty of not doing all the time. But last week I had one of the most incredible births where the woman taught me so much. So I thought I would share this story, and with this story comes with a bunch of tips and tricks on how to get a stalled labor going and ways to help progress a normal labor and facilitate a normal birth. So again, as similar reflection stories, some of the details are changed to protect the identity of this woman, and I'm not going to go into too much specific details, and some details may be changed as well. But generally, this will follow what has occurred. So to give you some background information on this story, I took over care of this woman from a morning shift. So I was handed over that she was a primiparous woman, meaning it was her first baby. She was of Indian ethnicity and she was a Muslim woman. And these details come into play later on. I was handed over that she had presented the night before in early labor, contracting about 4 in 10, and at that time she was around 4 centimeters dilated. So when I walked into the room, I could see that this woman was amazing. She was incredibly calm. She barely even looked like she was in labor, and she looked to be doing so incredibly well. So I was handed over that an internal exam had just been performed and she was 6 to 7 centimeters dilated, and at that internal exam her waters had been ruptured and there was MEC lichor, so she had a CTG in situ. So she was contracting at this time 2 in 10, mild to moderate, and I was handed over by the night staff that she would probably have to have an augment, which is when they use oxytocin to help increase contractions and uterine activity. So having this handover, I tried not to let it kind of scare me or kind of modify what I was going to do to work with this woman. I knew that I wanted to facilitate normal birth, especially seeing as she looked to be in such a good headspace and very motivated for normal birth. So I had just purchased some clary sage, which I also posted on my Instagram, which studies show helps increase levels of oxytocin. At first I was a bit of a non-believer, but the day before I was doing an induction and the woman had no uterine activity. We were waiting to get cannulas in and things like that, so I thought I would start diffusing the clary sage, and she began contracting without anything, just the clary sage. So I was a passionate believer of clary sage by then, so thought I would pop some of that on. So I put the clary sage on, and the husband complimented that it smelled wonderful and he was so glad it had been put on, and it seemed to kind of change the vibe in the room. It's amazing how powerful the sense of smell is, and I think, of this room that's been kind of washed with antiseptic and is very medicalized, having this scent go through it really helps change the atmosphere. So I put the clary sage on, and that is what I had palpated myself. So the first thing I encouraged the woman to do was get off the bed and try and move around. So that's what she did. I encouraged her to go to the toilet, which is an amazing thing to try and facilitate moving the baby around. I encouraged her to be on the birth ball. So things seemed to be going along nicely. She was dealing with the intensity of the contractions incredibly well, but remained contracting 2 in 10. So part of me got a little bit worried because with some experience in midwifery, generally a woman to be progressing well in labor needs to be contracting 4 to 5 in 10, at least as a primiparous woman. However, she was going to teach me. So she was managing the contractions very well, and at all costs I wanted to avoid doing another internal exam until she was due the 4 hours, and if I could try and get her progressing enough to not do an internal exam, something I'm wanting to get used to, especially after hearing that I'll be in my dream job doing caseload. I want to be able to, have as little interventions as possible, and I thought this is a perfect example to try that. We continued using things like movement. Another thing we used that worked incredibly well is a technique I learned during a calm birth workshop, which is kind of light massage. So it's between contractions, just kind of calmly like doing little almost tickles, and this helps stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system, and it allows the women to go into a more relaxed state of mind. If any of you have heard of ASMR, autonomous motor sensory response, and it's when you kind of get these nice tingles and this very comforting feeling, and this is quite similar to that, and I found it very useful to use between contractions. One thing that if I get a chance to do, I also try and set up the birth psychologically for the woman. So because this woman was very relaxed and very calm, I really took the time to have a conversation about expectations during birth and how to kind of mentally frame the intensity of the contractions. One thing I love to do with women is to try and take away as much of the fear of birth as I can. So when I describe contractions, I like to describe them as exercising and working out, because that's something I can relate to. So I say to them, you know, when you're beginning a run or you're lifting heavy, or, you know, you're really getting into exercise, it can be very uncomfortable at first, almost painful. You feel like giving up, you feel exhausted, your mind is fighting against it and is trying to tell you something's wrong. But if you keep continuing and you push through that, then your endorphins start to kick in and you get this incredible high and feel like you can keep going, and you can really smash a workout. Now, this pain and discomfort you feel during this workout, most of the time you're not scared of, you're not terrified of it, you don't necessarily try and fight it so much. And this is how I try and frame the intensity of the contractions during birth. And so I try and say, you know, trust that your body is going to create the endorphins that will help you get through this. So that's one thing we talked about. So this woman, as I mentioned previously, was a Muslim woman. So one thing that I learned working at the previous hospital I did, where there was a large population of Muslim women, is that birth is a very sacred time. It's when the veil between heaven and earth is the thinnest, and where kind of prayers and messages to God are the most effective. So I kind of talked to her about this and how I absolutely love that concept, and encourage her to make prayers, you know, during the contractions, during her labor. And I feel like this really helped to distract her and stimulate that oxytocin, because she was having these loving thoughts for her family and her baby, and it really helped distract her and kind of frame birth as a more positive experience for her. So through all this, she seemed to still be progressing well, but I thought that I would pull out a few more things in my toolkit to help move things along, aware that she was on this timeline, being in this hospital. You know, they kind of put them on like a countdown clock. So instead of kind of resisting this, I think, how can I kind of help facilitate normal birth in this scenario where the woman is put under kind of a timer. So the next thing we did to help stimulate oxytocin is express breast milk. I absolutely think this is like a magical thing to do in labor, because for me it does a few things. So it gets the woman familiar with her breast. So often I will ask if I'm able to demonstrate, and then I'll get her to start trying to express. It also shows them that they do have milk there and that they will have enough milk for their baby. And this is always a common concern in the postnatal period. So to show them this, it can be a really positive thing to help with the breastfeeding experience. It also gets them comfortable with their nipples and their breasts, so that when baby's born, they're able to kind of be familiar with that technique of the of baby sucking and baby latching on. And why we do this to speed up labor is that it stimulates the oxytocin hormone. She was able to express a whole 3 meals of breast milk, which was just incredible. It built up her confidence to be able to breastfeed, and it also allowed her to have some milk that we could save for later if she would need it. So after doing this, it had been 4 hours, and the woman at this time was requesting an internal exam, because she herself wanted to know where she was at. So I had a discussion to her about expectations and how the cervix, you know, you can really only tell when you do an internal exam what the cervix is doing at that second. Previously I've spoken about many situations, especially with women who have had a few babies, where you've gone to do an internal exam, she's been 5 centimeters, and then the baby's come like 20 minutes later. So I tried to educate her and tell her that I didn't want this to be a mental block for her, and that it should just be used as a tool to keep on guiding us. I did the internal exam and she was 9 centimeters, which was incredible, and I think this really helped encourage her along her way. So one thing that I did to help kind of progress her along even further as she was still, you know, contracting 2 and 10 is do some acupressure. So I've done 2 acupressure workshops and I love to do acupressure. I find it's something that the husbands can get involved with, and I try and involve them as much as possible, but also something I can do to help also be with women, because sometimes with a woman in labor you can feel, and I know especially I did feel as a student, that your roles are kind of undefined and you don't know how much to get involved. So what we did is the woman was on the bed and the bed was up and she was kind of in an all fours position. And what I used is the bladder 32 point. So you can look it up, but I can link kind of a picture below. I might even make an Instagram post about it because it was so effective. So it's a point in the back between the 2 dimples and kind of the sacrum's here, the 2 dimples are here, and you go a bit more in. And if you hold it for 10 minutes, it helps with things like dilation of the cervix and removing like a cervical lip. So I held it for 10 minutes and then after that you could see signs that baby was moving down, which was incredible. And it worked super effectively. So the woman that I was with started to get the urge to push, which was great. So she began to push kind of in different positions. So we tried all fours. She wanted to go on her back at a time, so we tried left lateral. We tried walking and pushing standing up, pushing on the toilet, and after an hour and a half I was getting a bit scared and disheartened, and so was she. She was asking for an episiotomy, and to which I said, no, you can do this, you're really strong. And that's when I thought to use a birth stool. So birth stools can be great, and I've never used one before, but I know that that, you know, being in that position, almost toilet-like, helps a woman mentally in her head kind of realize what they might need to help push. So I was trying to let her involuntary push as much as possible, but being again aware that she was on a timer of second stage, which is 2 hours for pregnant women, I thought I have to get creative to allow her to have this normal birth. A lot of the time during this labor, as it was kind of stopping and starting, I was very anxious. I was questioning myself, I was questioning normal birth, I was questioning, you know, what interventions needed to be done. And really it was a massive lesson on trusting the process of normal birth, trusting the woman, you know, and trusting the little natural tricks and tools along the way. So when she got onto the birth stool, you could tell that the pushing was a lot more effective. She was doing incredibly. One thing that really helped was using a mirror. As she was able to visualize what was happening, it allowed her to kind of push with more of a purpose when she felt those contractions. And with the mech lico, it was something I had to keep in the back of my mind. So this is when we started to do some kind of like what we call active pushing, which is more instructed pushing. Of course, I try and avoid this, but at times, working in the situation that I am, sometimes it does have to be utilized. But as much as I can, even if it is active pushing, I try and encourage the woman to still go with her body and trust her body as much as possible. So I was sitting on the floor, the woman was in front of me on the birth stool, and behind was her husband. So she was getting this amazing encouragement and support from her husband. I was holding the mirror so she could see what she was doing. And one amazing thing she did, which I just thought was incredible, was she was guarding her own perineum. She was feeling her baby, feeling how much progress she'd made, supporting her perineum as the baby came down. And it was the first time I'd seen that, and it was absolutely incredible. I was just high off the oxytocin she was producing. She was so assured in herself, she knew exactly what she was doing, and that's why I think psychology is so important when it comes to birth, and an area that I would love to do more kind of research and exploration into. So as the baby's head started to come on view, we hit the assist because I hit the assist button because, you know, it's policy to have 2 midwives in for the birth. We also kind of called the ped to come, page the ped, because of mech lico, a ped has to be present at birth. So she began pushing, and baby kind of was doing what a normal prematurous birth does, in where baby comes in and out, back and forth, that rocking motion to allow the perineum to stretch. However, on the CTG, we could see that baby's heart rate was remaining down, about 80 to 90 beats per minute. This can be normal as the baby's on the perineum. it does mean we have to try and get baby out sooner than later. So this was when I really felt most connected with a woman. I was looking her in the eyes, I was saying, you can do this, you've got this. She wanted to give up, but I just kind of kept trying to restore her strength and said, I believe in you, you're an amazing woman. And then her husband was joining in, and she was just kind of showered with these affirmations, and she just like kind of, it's almost like something clicked in her, and she's like, I'm getting my baby out. So she essentially was guarding her own perineum and brought her own baby into the world, and it was incredible. So why I want to tell you about this story is because I know that uni generally teaches you this idea of normal birth, but you're unable to see it in practice quite a lot of times. And so I think it's so important to share these positive birth stories and you know, and these amazing tips and tricks to help facilitate normal birth. I hope you guys enjoyed this beautiful woman's story, and I hope that I have many more to share. I would also love you guys to share your stories of beautiful normal births below so that we can all read them. Thank you so much again for watching. I love to interact with you guys, and I absolutely love to share my passion for birth and hear your passion as well. If you have any video suggestions, let me know. If you want to message me on Instagram. I always get back to you, normally in video format, because I love it. But thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.